Hello, my name is Rachel and I'm an RSE teacher for Step 2 Young People's Health. This video is about capacity. You may think you know this word, it may be that you know other versions of it. You may understand what we're going to talk about today, you may not. So capacity in this sense is the ability to use and understand information to make a decision and communicate any decision that is made. You might lack capacity if your mind is impaired or disturbed in some way that means you're unable to make the decision at that time. So we need to look at why it's needed, why it's important. Consent is a really vital part of life. It's about choosing to respect personal and emotional boundaries. There is consent for loads of different things. You ask permission for things. By practicing consent, you show that you value other people's choices. And if you don't have the capacity to consent, you can't fully express those boundaries. You can't fully express those wishes. So it's really important that people understand that not everybody has the capacity to consent. So talking about who does have capacity, it depends on the type of consent that you are looking for. So individual capacity, this is your capacity for something, and that's your ability to do it. Are you able to do it, or the amount of it that you are able to do? So you might hear about this one in various situations. So if somebody asked me to clean their entire house from top to bottom, I might not have the capacity to do that in the time that they want me to do it in. I might just not be able to do it. In terms of sexual consent, you don't have the capacity to make decisions about sex under the age of 13. The law says that under 13 you cannot make any decisions about sex whatsoever because you're too young, you don't have capacity. But legally you can't give consent until you're 16. In a medical situation, consent is not needed for emergency treatment. It is assumed that you give consent anyway. If you're unconscious, they're not going to wait until you've woken back up so that you can say, actually, yes, please treat my broken leg. All adults are assumed to have capacity unless there's significant evidence otherwise. So all adults are assumed to be able to make medical decisions unless there is significant evidence to show they can't. People over 16 can make their own decisions about treatments, and 16 and 17-year-olds are considered to, in the same way as adults, in these medical situations. We are going to talk about some reasons why you might not have that capacity. In terms of your capacity at work, it might be that you wouldn't take on extra projects if you don't have the capacity to do so. It might be that you are just so busy with the stuff you're already doing that you don't have capacity to take on anything else. You don't have the time to take on anything else. And we all are considered to have capacity to choose a government once we become of age. So legally we can vote from the age of 18. So at that point, we are considered to have the capacity to be able to do that unless, in similar circumstances to the medical one, there is significant evidence to suggest we can't make those decisions. So this is from the Mental Capacity Act 2005. There are 5 principles. It's designed to protect and empower people who might lack the mental capacity to make their own decisions about care and treatment. So like I said before, it applies to everybody aged 16 and over. So there has to be a presumption of capacity. There has to be an assumption that you can make a decision. So if you're assessing somebody, you have to start by assuming that they are okay to make their own decisions. You might get on to step 2, where individuals need to be supported to make their own decisions. Some people will know their own mind anyway, and that's absolutely fine. They can make that decision. Some people may need help. That could be anything from explaining the options to them really clearly, or it could be sitting them down, taking them away from the situation, trying to find out their wishes, that kind of thing. You cannot say somebody lacks capacity just because you don't like the decision that they've made. So for example, if a doctor is advising one treatment, but there is an alternative, and the patient says, no, I want the alternative, the doctor can't say, right, that's it, you don't have the capacity to make this decision, I'm going to make it for you. Just because they don't agree with it doesn't mean they can take the decision out of somebody's hands. If we get to the fourth principle, that's best interests. So these are for 4 and 5 are for when people cannot make their own decisions. In this situation, a best interest checklist would be used, and that would be worked through by a group of professionals to see what the best interests of that person is. And if that has had to take place, then they go for the least restrictive option. So they're checking that the decisions that have been made don't stop your freedoms more than is necessary. So for example, say you are an adult with a learning disability of autism perhaps, and you need somebody to dress you, to clothe you, to wash you, all of those personal care elements. The decision cannot be made that you should go and live in a home for adults with learning disabilities just because that's easier. If you are still able to be in another environment where you can be looked after just as easily, then you should be allowed to stay there. They can't lock you up just because they think that that's easier. It needs to be what's best for you and what restricts your freedom less. So the best interests checklist, these must be followed when making a best interest decision. So when you're at the point where you may not be able to make decisions for yourself, this is what has to be followed. Is that person going to get their capacity back? Is this just a temporary thing? It has to involve the person, so they will consider the wishes of the person. They'll consult all relevant people, any doctors, potential family members that might have some areas of responsibility. They'll look at all the information. Is this long term? Is it short term? What is it that's caused it? How likely is it that a recovery will be made? That kind of thing. They must not make any assumptions about what the person wants. So they must look at past, present and future wishes. So for example, if that person has previously said, I do not want this to happen to me, that has to be considered in this best interest checklist. And like I said, they must always pick the very least restrictive option. So when somebody lacks mental capacity, it might be because they just do not understand the information about the decision that needs to be made. It might be that they have an inability to remember the information. So they could have amnesia, for example. It might be that they can't use the information to make the decision. Again, that could come back to understanding. It could be that they have a processing issue where they've just got all the information and they just have no idea what to do with it. Or it might be that they physically can't communicate that decision. Again, these can be short-term or long-term. So the test that they have to do is in the top right-hand corner. Stage 1, proof that you have an illness or injury that affects the way your brain or mind works. So there has to be some sort of proof. So that's probably going to be a medical diagnosis. And in stage 2, they have to consider that the illness or injury affects you so much that you're unable to make a specific decision at a certain time. So it could be one of the examples of illness or injury that you see there. Conditions associated with some forms of mental illness. The person might have dementia. They might have a significant learning disability. There might be long-term effects from brain damage. They might have a physical or medical condition that causes confusion, drowsiness, or loss of consciousness. They might have just been knocked out and have a concussion, and that's stopping their ability to think clearly and to be able to make decisions about, say, treatment. So it could be that that is clearly reversible. So this is that, is it a short-term or a long-term thing? Their mental capacity might be lacking because of the symptoms of drug or alcohol use. So again, that might be very short term. It could be due to delirium, and there you have it, the concussion following the head injury. So some of them are temporary. Some of them, once they've started, they become permanent. You don't come back from dementia. Usually you do get worse. So it may well be that you might have capacity in, say, July, and then by Christmas that capacity has severely diminished and you are not able to make those decisions anymore. Okay, so there are some examples of places that can help you with issues relating to capacity. You've got Step 2 Young People's Health. We help with sexual health and mental health for young people up to the age of 24. The NHS has a lot of information about capacity, especially around making medical decisions. Rethink mental illness. Obviously, if you have a significant mental illness, you may not be in a position to make decisions about yourself that are for your benefit. MenCap is the charity that supports adults with learning disabilities. They've got a fantastic bit of information on their website. Scope, equally, they search for equality for disabled people so that they are empowered to make their own decisions where they are able to do so. And you've got Mind, which is a mental health charity. So again, they have a lot of information about capacity around the Mental Health Act.